like to sell your company for 8 figures? Discover how to do it in today's session with Beau Bennett. Beau Bennett is an entrepreneur. He's a social psychologist, and he has a lot of very varied experience in psychology, business and success, comedy, and artificial intelligence as well. Now, the first question is, what are the key factors that differentiate a company that can sell for 8 figures versus one that might sell for less? Welcome to Awakened Titans podcast with Lily Patrascu, mind-blowing conversations with influential business titans sharing how you can manifest abundance, love, joy, success through quantum awakening, quantum manifestation, quantum healing, quantum miracles, exponential business growth, and innovative products and services.
I guess the answer to that is how much somebody is willing to pay for it. Obviously, you have to have a company of value, and you have to have somebody else that actually sees the value. In addition to that, you have to have somebody who sees the value of the company that can also afford to pay for it. So there are a lot of people who would love to buy companies, but they just don't have the money. They don't have the availability. So in shopping around a company, one needs to make sure that they're going after the right people. Most of the time, when we're talking about these kind of numbers, you're talking about like a public company very often, or a very large private company that has those kind of funds. But also some business deals are done with those kind of numbers, but not necessarily all cash. And they give away part of the company, and that's a possibility as well.
Thank you. Tell us about your journey of how you ended up selling your company for 8 figures.
Sure. Well, it started with selling a company for 1 figure, literally $1. That was how much I sold my company for in college. I started the company, and it was an advertising specialty company, and I was busy going around and marketing it to other colleges and universities, building up business. And it did actually very well over the course of 4 years, until I had a client that pretty much bankrupted me. He offered me this very big job, this big account, and he made me, in order to get it, I had to give him credit, and he was not credit worthy. And he took advantage of my youth and my inexperience at the time, and that was it for the company. But fortunately, I was working with somebody who was willing to buy my company for $1 and take off all the responsibility from me, which was great. And then after that, I kind of moved on to doing something else. And that was the beginning of the company for $20 million. It was a graphic design company initially, but then it turned out to be more of an internet web hosting company. And that was back in 1995 when internet web hosting first just came out. So it was good. It was in the right place at the right time.
Thank you. So tell us more about that journey of how you managed to take that business to 8 figures.
So the business started with just like some credit cards that I had, like financing it for a few $1,000s, just getting like the necessary computer equipment and so forth. And then really it just kept on building over time. We had a model where it was a monthly subscription type of service. So typical with web hosting, what people are used to today. So we had just people that would give us like $20 a month, $30 a month, $99 a month. And over time, that started to build up to like a really nice monthly income. And with that, I just kept on throwing money back in the company, and just doing a little bit more advertising, a little bit more marketing. I barely took any money out, just like kind of enough to get by, and hired more people because we needed more people to do the work, bought more computers. And over the course of a few years, it was still in a state where like anything could happen. We were like going month to month. We weren't rolling in the dough. It was a lot of expenses, and it was a lot of money, a lot of work going into it. We were getting a pretty decent monthly revenue, but it was just a lot, and it was a lot of pressure. But we finally got to the point where it was right before the internet bust back in 2001, the dot-com burst. And we were still kind of riding the wave of the internet, and when we were in negotiations with a bunch of different companies. And At that time, that's when somebody was willing to give us that kind of money for the company. Granted, it was mostly in stock at the time, but it was still good value. So we did it. So that was kind of the journey of starting from credit cards to 20 million.
Do you find that your background in comedy and a social psychologist and business and the AI, do you find that all of these things kind of helped you to build a successful business? And if yes, in what ways did you specifically use these things in order to differentiate or maybe get a higher price for your business? Was it that you understood your potential buyers better? Was it that you used automation? What was it that you feel were the differentiating factors that enabled you to sell your business for 8 figures?
Well, interestingly, when I graduated college, I graduated with a degree in marketing, and I didn't have my psychology background. And that's kind of when I went straight into business. So all of this stuff that I've been doing after I sold my company that makes me an interesting person wasn't really there before I sold my company. So I would love to say, like, talk to you about how psychology could help with business and how psychology helped me get to that figure. But that's just not the case. The case was, I barely had any psychology background at the time of running the business. I guess the only thing I could relate to is with like the comedy, because I've always been like into comedy. That's always been a big part of my life, all growing up. But that probably didn't have much to do with it, besides just being able to look at major issues that have come up over those years and seeing them in kind of like a lighthearted way, not taking them too seriously, and being able to like laugh about it and joke about it and still push forward. I think having that kind of mindset definitely keeps the level of stress way down and allows us to get where we need to go.
Thank you. What foundational elements need to be in place for someone to be able to sell their business for 8 figures?
I think when it comes to foundational, I guess it depends on what you consider foundational. But again, I think it comes down to having a buyer who is willing to pay that much. I mean, at the end of the day, that's all it really is. Because if you look at some of the companies that are around today, or even some that have been around in the past, I mean, they're like terrible in terms of like classic valuation. And I think that's important for people to understand. You may think a more traditional sense, or maybe if you come from like an Ivy League school or you have a background in finance, you're thinking that, okay, well, let's look at the revenues, let's look at the profit line, and then we could really get a good sense of how much the business is worth. Well, that's a good start. And that's a good way to try to justify how much you want for the business. But in reality, and we see this every day, like if somebody wants your business, and they'll pay like virtually anything for it, like if they have the money, it's a matter of desire. It's a matter of like selling your business to other people, getting them to see the value in it, even if there really is no value. And you have to watch out for that too. If you're a buyer looking to like invest in a business or buy something, it's a lot of smoke and mirrors. It's a lot of hype. And I think that people fall for that. But a lot of that, especially, go back 25 years ago in the .com boom, when if you just had like a domain name with a .com at the end, people would throw money at you left and right, thinking that it's the best idea ever. And it turns out like the vast majority of these companies, they had like no good business model. They had no way to make money. They were just spending money. They had a lot of users. They had a lot of interest because it was an interesting thing that they were doing, but they just weren't making any money. And the market eventually realized that, which is the reason for the .com bust in 2001. But even today, it seems like it's a new generation maybe. And this generation of investors haven't learned that hard lesson. And we see people investing in companies that don't quite have the justification for the kind of value it does. But this all ties back to your original question, like about the foundation of building a company of that value. If you can get people to believe the company is worth that much, that's it. That's your foundation. I don't recommend that because, again, I think it is like smoke and mirrors. And I think besides being like unethical, but if we're even talking about that when in the business world and investors, investors kind of understand that it's all buyer beware, and professional investors especially. But for the most part, I think it's important to actually be able to justify a company of this kind of value, be able to justify the value that the company has. If you're asking 8 figures for your company, 6 figures, 7 figures, whatever, be able to stand up in front of like an imaginary audience of potential investors and be able to explain clearly and articulately how it's worth that much, right? You got to be able to tell them what it's actually worth and convince them that it's worth that much. So I think that's kind of the foundational, the core foundation of justifying a company's value.
What are the top ways to increase perceived value?
So when we're talking about perceived value now, okay, so that's different than, well, is it? That's an interesting question. Is perceived value different than actual value? Because perceived, at the end of the day, it's what somebody, again, is willing to pay for it, and that's value, right? So let's not go down that road. Let's just say value is value, whether it be perceived or not. Okay. And what are some ways to do it? It's all about marketing. I mean, it really is. It's about marketing and being able to sell, like salesmanship, being able to sell yourself and your company, your vision of the company, and being able to say, well, here's the company, here how it is today, and here's what I think that a good buyer can be able to do with it and where it could go in the future. I think that vision is very important because a lot of buyers may not have that vision. They might see some potential that you don't see, which is why they're willing to offer more than you may expect. But it also may be the case, and I think in most cases, where they just don't see any potential. They don't see the same kind of potential that you do. They just see it as more like the kind of like bottom line type of old school evaluation. So if you could kind of break through that and say, yeah, I understand like my revenues are currently X amount per month, and based on a 3 times multiple, the company we're valued at Y, right? However, what you're not seeing is this. And then you go on to explain like what it would take to get this company to like 5 times bigger, 10 times bigger, 100 times bigger, whatever. Let them see that kind of value. And I think that's what's really important. And that's what really comes down to in terms of like popping up the valuation.
Thank you. How much should you be making in order to reach an 8-figure valuation? I mean, in terms of revenue and profit.
Well, in our case, again, we have to take the historical context into consideration here because it was back in the .com days when I don't think we've seen these kind of valuations. Well, that's not actually true. I mean, there are some companies today that you like, what the heck? Like, how is this happening? But back then, if I remember correctly, we were making, I think, like 70,000 per month in revenue, and we didn't have a lot of that was monthly revenue. So there's a difference, of course, when you're talking about just like taking in money from work and you're doing the work in return for the money and you're making 70,000, and that's good. But if you have like 70,000 in recurring monthly revenue from like subscription-based services, especially if the subscription base is the type of base that tends to hold on and stay with you for a long time, which in web hosting it tends to be, because there's a lot of work of creating a site and moving it over with different platforms. So you have got that sticky element to it. So that really kind of pushed up the value as well. And we didn't have like a heck of a lot of expenses. We were making a profit. I mean, it was a good business model and ripe for expansion, and which is why the company that bought us saw that kind of value, and we were able to sell them that kind of value. However, what none of us took into consideration really was the .com bust, and when that happened, their company essentially went bankrupt, and they went out of business after they bought us, which means what was left of our business ended up getting bought and split into pieces by, the vulture type of companies just going after the assets.
Thank you. How important is revenue versus profitability in terms of ratio when positioning a company for a high value sale?
So that is definitely a question that you would ask like a finance major, somebody that's more focused in that part of it. And even then, I would say that's important to the right kind of buyer. And I think like when you are dealing with buyers, you're dealing with like a team of buyers at this valuation. You're not dealing with just like one guy, Jim, who's going to pay you like cash from his checkbook. When you're talking $20 million, it's a different type of setup. So yes, you're going to have somebody like on my team. I had somebody who was able to answer those questions and and kind of sell it to the finance people on their side as well. But at the end of the day, it comes down to again what the perceived value and what it's really worth.
Thank you.
What somebody sees in like a potential value in.
Yes, thank you. What role does a company's brand, reputation, and customer loyalty play in driving up its sale price to the 8-figure range?
I think it plays a huge part. The brand, of course, is important depending on depending on the quality of the brand. The brand is important in general because if you have a bad quality associated with the brand, then that brings the value down negatively. If you have a positive, it brings it up positively. And I'm sorry, you said what other? There's a couple other parts of that. The brand,
the company's brand, reputation, and customer loyalty.
Customer loyalty, reputation is similar to the brand, right? Because you either have a good reputation or a bad reputation, especially online. That's very important. The customer loyalty, that's a big one when it comes to a service or a business that has a recurring revenue stream where you have the same customers coming back over and over, whether it be a subscription-based service where they're like forced monthly to make payments to you, or a type of service that they may use you multiple times a year on a regular basis. So the brand loyalty is really important, and that's where like customer relationships come in. And I've always run the company, and even that company, it was a very small company. We had like 15 people. I was involved in daily operations, and I dealt with like everybody directly for the most part. And even out of the 15 people, we had like 5 that were not even, I think like maybe 3 that were full time, and the rest were just kind of like part-time contractors. So with that small type of environment, we were allowed to build up these customer relationships that really kept people coming back and using our service and recommending other people. And that was important to the valuation.
Thank you. What are the key financial metrics and performance indicators buyers look at when considering such a high purchase?
Generally, it's they want to know about the revenue, and they want to know like what kind of revenue it is. Again, is it one-time revenue or is it recurring revenue? And then they're interested in profitability, but not as much as you would think. It was really all about revenue. Because with how much revenue are you bringing in, if you could, can you increase that? I have a feeling like a lot of buyers, especially savvy buyers, know that they could take a company that has like a good revenue stream and low profitability or no profitability, and they could make the business more efficient. They could scale it up, and they could scale the workforce down or change things. And it's kind of like the same mentality that home buyers, that like fixer uppers have. Like they see like this old house and they say, wow, this is fantastic. I love it because I know I could redo the kitchen, I could redo the bathrooms, and I could sell it for like a huge profit. And that's the same mindset is a lot of buyers that look at a company. They like the idea that it may not be like a company that's making a whole heck of a lot of money right away. They're okay with that as long as it has like a solid foundational like a revenue stream, like a good business model, something that has good potential, and revenue is the best indicator of that.
Thank you. Can I ask you, why did you sell the company in the first place? Did you have like a special reason, or you just figured out, you know what, I am better off selling this thing right now because it's making good profit. I can use that for something else. What was your reasoning for selling it?
I wanted money. I wanted a lot of money. Number one reason. Number two reason was I I recognized, like many people did back then, the absurdity of the valuations of these dot-com businesses, myself included, which was one of them. I knew how much we were making. I knew how far I could push this business, even with a cash infusion, and how big we could get it. And it was nowhere near the kind of valuation that they were offering. So it was a no-brainer to take that money and then just do something else with it, whatever it may be. So that's what led me to say absolutely. But I realize in most situations, selling a company, it's not that easy of a decision, because you have to look at how much money you're currently making, what the potential is, and if you sell that, you're building something up again from scratch, if that's your plan, or how long is that money going to last you. There's a lot of variables in that equation, which makes the decision a lot more difficult than the decision I had to make.
Thank you. If you were to do this again and include AI, comedy, your knowledge of psychology, and your knowledge of business, what would you incorporate in your business that would enable, let's say, an entrepreneur to grow their business to be able to sell it for 8 figures? What elements from that would you include?
Sure. So I'm actually doing that more now, because after I sold the business, of course, I started other businesses, and I run one now. Been running this current, like the publishing industry business for like the past 13, 14 years. And yeah, a lot of the things that I didn't do before, I'm doing now, which doesn't mean it doesn't translate to money necessarily. It doesn't translate to a higher dollar figure, because again, 25 years ago, I was in the right place at the right time, and it was a fortunate situation where all the factors just came into place. But I do believe that if I had the knowledge that I have today, that $20 million would have been a heck of a lot more back then. I think I could have done a much better job starting with the information I have now. And I think like mostly that has to do with, obviously artificial intelligence wasn't available back then, at least not commercially. So there's no way that you could incorporate that. But today, for example, we're using AI in ways that saves like countless hours. And like the money that we would have to pay contractors to do certain work, AI is doing for free, doing it much more efficiently, better by virtually all metrics, and for free practically. So that's huge. Like being able to use artificial intelligence, like incorporate that into your business and use it to help you grow. And in terms of psychology, well, that's a lot of that comes out in the marketing and the design of the business and the website and the marketing materials.
Thank you. What ways do you suggest entrepreneurs add AI to their business operations, to their workflow, to their sales, to their marketing, so they can increase their company's valuation?
I would say in any way they can. And by that, I mean, look at not just the marketing aspect or the sales aspect, but look at the production, look at the like efficiency. Just basically, I would write down like everything that you do or your company does, like all the different areas. And then you could think about like, okay, how could AI help with this? You don't even have to think about it. You could ask AI directly. You could feed it in, like, here are the things that I do that our business does on a regular basis. How could you, AI, help me with this? And you will get like an extremely detailed answer of all the different ways that AI could help. And then you just find out which ways make sense to be able to use AI. And maybe you might like replace 10 people in your company with one person, like an AI manager or something that handles all this for you and manages this. And then you'll be in a much better position.
Thank you. Would you say that AI use would have the biggest impact in terms of saving money, saving time? Or are there specific ways that entrepreneurs can use AI in order to increase sales as well?
Yeah, both. You could definitely use it to save time. I mean, I could tell you that from experience, like how much time I save. It's crazy. But when it comes to sales, yes, I think that in my experience, AI has been a much better salesperson than I am. And I mean that by like writing marketing materials, emails, promotional emails. I've, although I have a marketing background, I've always never been comfortable with kind of like with sales speak, with writing sales copy, because what I mostly do in my life now is a lot of what I do is focused on critical thinking, reasoning, logic, and that a lot of times is antithetical to sales, right? You like a really good sales pitch will exaggerate things. I mean, it's not like lying, but I mean, you know how sales works. Everybody knows how sales works. And to get in that kind of mindset when you're like day to day focused on analyzing everything and looking for every little thing that doesn't fall into this reasoning spectrum and everything that's not completely true, like that's your life looking at things like that and picking up on everything. It's very difficult to kind of switch on that sales mode. So that's why I found like artificial intelligence incredibly helpful, because it could write fantastic sales copy for me that I'm like, ooh, that's kind of cheesy, but it's good. Like I can't see myself writing that, but it's good. I'm going to use it, and it's effective.
Thank you. What kind of prompts would you give to ChatGPT or other AI tools in order to write better, better copy that converts?
Well, first you have to identify what kind of copy that you're writing. So, like, let's say, for example, you're doing a sales, like an email. You need to tell AI as much as you could possibly tell it about what you're doing, about like what your core business is or whatever, what you're trying to sell, and about who the message is directed to. So you may say, for example, like in a prompt, like hello, please help me come up with a really good sales pitch for my product, which is AI generated books. I am pitching this to authors, first time authors that have written many books that may appreciate this service. It's the first email going out to them. So it's an introductory email. And ultimately, I want to get them to click on the link that's in the email. So there you go. And you might want to say like the email gets them to sign, the link gets them to sign up for our database or something, sign up for our mailing list. So once you do that, then AI generally has the information it needs to craft like a really good email. But the bottom line is try to be as specific as possible, as detailed as possible, and then let AI take a shot at it. And then you would read it, and then you would like make some manual changes, or you could have it, oh, you know what, I forgot this, add this in there too, and it could revise it. So it works really well like that.
Thank you. What's the best way for AI to help you to find the right buyers?
That's an interesting question, because I have not tried that yet for that purpose, but I could see that being a very, I guess, usual use for it, or a common use, something that's definitely been done before and is probably done every day. And you would just essentially ask it the same questions. You would tell it as much as you can about your company, and you would say that, and I'm looking to sell the company. What do you suggest I do? So have it start with like a general outline. That's what I would do, and then it might give you like a full couple pages on, okay, make sure you have like your like a marketing report planned, and then it'll just give you some really good ideas on how to sell. Probably tell you about like different companies you could work with as well. But then you could say, after that, you could go into more details, and you could say, okay, now about like after I have all this information done, I want to send this report to whom? Who would I send it to? And then it'll give you a bunch of ideas. And then you could ask like, well, how do I contact these people? Do you have information on them? And you go from there.
Thank you. What do you think eight-figure business buyers tend to look for in a business they want to buy?
Again, value. It all comes down to that. It's all about like how could they use your business and increasing like the value for their company. And then that brings up an interesting question, because sometimes the acquisition strategy that they have may not be strictly financial, meaning that they may not just be interested about making money. You may be a competitor of theirs that is taking away a lot of their business, or somehow making it more difficult for them to achieve their goals. So simply by having you out of the market, it's going to be a lot easier for them, like exponentially. So there's value there that they may not be able to see, or that you may not be able to see, but they do see, or vice versa, actually. So when you're approaching somebody, you could kind of pitch those different angles too. Or maybe there's some kind of synergy that exists, like your product with another product, that again, the key here is like exponential growth, that alone, both of you guys, the two different companies, could do well, but together there's like an exponential factor that helps it out. So think about things like that and look for opportunities. And I think that's what, if you could kind of foresee those different extra value added opportunities, then you could sell them. And so when these companies are looking to buy, it could kind of justify that value.
Thank you. What are the best ways to add value to your company with AI? What I mean is, for example, if you were to add some sort of AI prompt engineering, I don't know, booklets, or let's say apps that kind of rely on AI to do a large part of the operations, or I don't know, if there was considerable AI element in the business that would be able to, let's say, release 80% of the general tasks that are done, and make a saving of 80% of the operations, would that add a lot of value? And how do you quantify that value in terms of the price you could potentially get? Would you have to like consult a CFO, or how would you get that valuation?
Well, on the one end, you could get that valuation by doing it strictly by financial numbers, right? Looking at the finances and getting like an exact figure, doing projections and showing somebody a pie chart or bar graph of projections. On the other end, you could also just kind of wing it. Again, this is where the sales pitch comes in, show the value and just kind of sell the idea of it, where you're not actually quantifying it, at least not with hard numbers, but it's more of a subjective type of value that you're adding to it. So that helps. So yeah, I think like, and you mentioned in your question itself, you had a lot of uses for AI that would obviously add value to the company. It all comes down to, again, being able to connect that service like AI with your company and explaining to a potential buyer like the value that it adds.
Follow us for more interviews with world's most influential business titans, providing you with the insights to awaken to your full potential, so you can get paid to be yourself, find true happiness, and manifest anything you desire.